Fantastic. All right, so let me share out, as always, the agenda for today. Got an action-packed, be action-packed if I can actually find how to share my PowerPoint. All right, so I will, you guys like slideshow mode better? The only thing I don't like about slideshow mode is I can't see anybody or see chat.
We can see this pretty well.
You
At least
can?
on my screen, and I use a little 15-inch laptop, so.
Is this good with everybody? Okay. All right. So quick agenda, we'll go down. Leron, I was really hoping we could get into the full attack surface management dev scrum, and since you're not wanting to do that today,
if you want to talk scaling infrastructure, we could go heavy and deep into that, Andrew. Happy to do that.
You want to talk about GDPR and standing up an EU, a site? I'm sure you'd love that, wouldn't you?
I love compliance more than anything I do, so yes.
Yeah, if we're running down that rabbit hole, it's how to create infrastructure as code. That's the real trick.
Sounds like right up my alley.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ben is sleeping. I'm right there with you, Ben. I spent all morning on this.
All right. So Chip will start us off with wins of the week. I put you a little on the spot here. I don't know if there was any questions, but since managed SaaS alerts went live, I figured if anybody had questions, we could see if there's any things outstanding or if there's anything that has come up now that you've gone live. We could address that. And then we have an awesome special guest, a fellow MSP, Chaim Black. Sorry for butchering that, Chaim Black, with Intrust. I'll talk about how he and I came to know each other, so to speak, and why I thought it'd be really important for you guys to hear about somebody that's a peer, but I think really putting himself out there in a good way on the security side of things. So I'm going to save the excitement and what we're going to talk about. I do have a few things after the wins of the week, few notable vulnerabilities. I just want to see if anybody's running into this. Is Cory with us, by the way? I was going to just ask him on one. I don't know if he's here or not. He doesn't look like he is. Okay. So Chip, let's kick it off. Any wins on the SaaS alert side as we see if anybody will let you warm it up there, but anything from you or Ben, big wins for the SaaS alerts team?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm almost going to combine your first two bullet points here into one. So the MSA project is going well. We are still awaiting some people to complete their onboarding. As sometimes happens, MSPs get very busy and they don't come back around and hold follow-up meetings. But the win of the week for me is a relatively new guy on Ben's team who really is, 6 weeks in. We started training this crew up back in early August. Identified a series of strange events for a partner that has not completed their onboarding, and so they weren't really technically being monitored yet. But this guy was sharp enough to call it out. And Ben, I'll let you take the story from there because I think you can tell it more completely than I. But we, wound up going a little bit, I'd say, above and over the mission of what MSA is supposed to do, because we're trying to just use automation, but we flagged something, and this team member reached out to the MSP and in fact confirmed that they found some interesting stuff that needed follow-up with their customers. So Ben, why don't you complete that story?
Sure. Yeah, so
leaving out all names, of course, to protect the innocent.
Yes, of course.
Why redact anything when we could have so much fun, Chip? Come on.
So yes, one of our guys noticed obviously it starts with a suspicious mailbox forwarding rule, and then not only alerted the partner of that, but also did additional dive into the alerts that surrounded that, and ended up finding massive amounts of file sharing happening after this bad actor had uploaded a PDF. And what they did is they externally shared this file to other companies that had done business with this particular organization in the same kind of industry. So what we had ended up finding was a supply chain attack that was just starting out, and notified the partner, and the partner asked, well, what is a supply chain attack? And we kind of explained to them what they should be looking for, the location of that file that was uploaded, and just the sheer number of file shares that happened, which I believe was close to 250 within like maybe 2 minutes. So it was definitely something something very fun. And so we decided to come up with a respond rule that would help kind of identify that, and we told our people on our office hours, and also quickly started adding it to our MSA customers.
So Andrew, just, I don't know if it's ringing bells in your head, but we've talked for 2 weeks now about this new slate of attacks, specifically around sending PDFs that are embedded with malware or links in the PDF to click. That further attack. So you can see that this is, the classic situation of someone successfully compromising account and then going after all the contacts within the directory structure in that account, vendors and customers, and perpetuating that using. It was just such classic, like this is textbook write-up of how these attacks occur and then how they get perpetuated on. So kudos to the team member who picked this up and reacted to it appropriately. And we learned yet another thing that is becoming popular, as we've talked about the last couple of weeks, and how to build respond rules for that, so we can allow Sadler's Automation to take care of it. And Ben, did this activity cause the partner to decide that they were going to complete their onboarding and get completely set up?
Oh yeah, definitely. It definitely helped. We've actually run into 3 token thefts this morning from different partners that haven't finished the onboarding process, and so it's definitely helping. But our biggest regret is that we can't do anything about it immediately. We have to wait for the email to get to the partner. Whereas if you complete the process, we're able to set up our rules to take those automatic actions.
Interesting. Chips, it reminds me of what, Bo Bullock's talked about is, getting in and enumerating the directory structure and, what he likes to do, right, as an attacker. So yeah, very classic. Any on the partner side, any wins? Eric Monroe, good to see you. Cory's with us. Awesome. Any partner wins that you guys want to share? Don't all speak at once.
I will jump in real quick and say, I don't know if Cory can hear me or not. I know he's sometimes on the phone, but that particular token theft campaign that he pointed out, I think it was about a month ago or so. We've seen a pretty hardcore uptick on that, even just today. So nice job on that, him and Zach.
Zach gets all the credit, not me. I just look pretty. That's it.
Nice job.
All right. So moving on. Great job, by the way, guys. So I had just 2 things I wanted to share. Again, I assume you guys know these, but I don't want to assume, right? These next few things. There is quite a bit of activity on this most recent Windows patch. I've asked a bunch of MSPs. No one's really said, oh yeah, I'm dealing a lot with this. This has to do a lot around Windows 10, and certainly not something that you might say, oh, we don't see that. But according to CISA, there is a whole host of attacks going on. Is anybody dealing at all with this, or has seen this most recent vulnerability? And I think part of it is a rollback as well, where you without getting into the details, you actually have to roll stuff back as well. So anybody dealing with this one? Cory, have you seen or heard about this?
Fortunately, I've been too busy to dive into this week's Patch Tuesday fun time.
Yeah, well, I was gonna. well, the next I was going to ask about if no one wants to talk about this one is, first off, kudos to you guys, and meaning the SonicWall team, Cory, you guys put this out very quickly. Are you, can you kind of give any details on this? And when I say details, it looks like, so the good news is like you guys jumped all over this. This was a high, like 9 point, I think it was a 9.8 out of 10, something like it was very high. But SonicWall responded really quickly. The patch has been available, but as always, we know from Shodan, people are slow to respond. Cory, has this been somewhat of consuming did this fall on your shoulders at all now that you're part of it or not?
No, I mean, I sat in some meetings. I've just been consumed with other things in the past 2 weeks, but I mean, this kind of goes into it just as a general understanding. Everybody has flaws, right?
Yeah,
Vulnerabilities pop up all the
100%.
time, and it's all a matter of how quick do you respond to them. That's why like I don't sit here and talk about, oh, don't go to Fortinet. We're SonicWall. Come to SonicWall. Fortinet has all these issues. No, right? We're all it's all hardware vendors, even software vendors, right? There's vulnerabilities that are going to come up, and it's a matter of how quick do you take ownership, how quick do you fix it, address it. And I know there's been a lot of meetings and a lot of chatter internally around this bug, and getting out, one, the correct patch for it, and two, getting it out there as quick as possible.
And by the way, Cory, my whole point of putting this one out and sharing it with the group today was because of your speed to response of this. This was quick, and to your point, everybody is going to have, and just look at Microsoft, 79 this past Tuesday. So yeah, we know there's lots of code out there. So that it was more so kudos to you guys, and just again making aware. I don't ever want to assume that everybody that might have a SonicWall out there knows, but if you do, take note. Or if you're onboarding, yeah, if you're onboarding a new client that might have SonicWall, take note.
We've dealt with 3 ransomware infections in the last probably 2 weeks, and I always start, when I talk to these MSPs, have that conversation. Okay, yes, you need to fix the inside, but you need to start with your front door first. How do they get in? Just having a username and password doesn't get them into your front door, right? There has to be a path in. And 2 of those 3, it's like, okay, well, what firewall are you using? Is it patched to the latest version? Oh, I don't know. Okay. Are you blocking inbound and outbound countries at a minimum, right? Most people block inbound, but no one really thinks about blocking outbound. And so it goes into that conversation of, okay, if someone rogue screen connect session, they get a persistence on an internal machine. If it's reaching out to somewhere like Venezuela, your firewall should be blocking that too. Right. And so this is just general knowledge, understanding around patching and proper configurations of firewalls, which, I mean, firewalls, right, they're not as prevalent out there in the, as they were 10 years ago, but they're still out there. They're still your front door.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And certainly are the kind of what, I don't know, the right adjective I want to use, Cory, but you and I talk about this a lot when people are like, was there exfiltration? And well, you're not giving me access to your logs. I really can't tell you.
Yeah, that's that. And it's far easier. I mean, think about it. You put a rule out there that says, hey, block inbound to outbound, right? Access to these countries. It's far easier to see, okay, show me any alerts that bounced off this rule than someone diving through all of your traffic logs, right?
Yeah, exactly. Very true. All right, I'll move on. So this is what I'm excited to have Chaim join us today. So Chaim, you and I have, I guess, virtually known each other for a few years, going back and forth. And you really caught my attention. You sent over what I really admire, right, about you is you put yourself out there. A lot of MSPs, we're not as MSPs on the margin. We're not willing necessarily to go out on a limb and put ourselves out there. And you've done so in a few different ways. I want to talk about number one. Being president of, the Cincinnati InfraGard, number two, built up quite a bit of following. I highlight that because this demo you put out on an MFA bypass, which Chip and Ben are kin to doing as well. I thought you did really well, and I was hoping you could show it today. But man, almost 800 likes. I can't imagine the number of impressions. But just if you being a fellow MSP, if you could do a quick intro of yourself, what you do over there at Intrust. You've been in the MSP space for a while, so welcome and thanks for joining.
Sure, yeah, definitely. Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm working for Intrust IT, a MSP in Cincinnati, for about 7 years now, and started out on the help desk. Then made my way to help really start the security team at Intrust, having just gone with the company's growth. I've always had a fascination with business email compromises really early on. Seeing that an initial, hey, just reset the password and move on doesn't really make any sense kind of thing. It's really, focusing on building tools to aid investigations, as well as, I can speak, in a bit more about the more modern attacks, so trying to keep my game up on it.
So you built some tools for as well?
Yeah, so this is way back when I built tools, really parsers, because it's really tough and for someone to, when someone has a business email compromise, hey, I can reset your password, but what happened? It's really difficult without having some tools to be able to really figure out, okay, what emails were touched. So I built a tool, like I said, about 5 or 6 years ago, that parses the unified audit log. It enriches it with like geolocation, looking at like VPN, like ISPs, and if there's a VPN provider, and put it into report format to help investigate business email compromises.
Very cool. Very cool. Chaim, before we get into the demo and then post demo, I got a few articles that I always share a few articles that I'd love for you to chat about. One was a Microsoft one that was really well written on preventing token bypass and token harvesting and things like that. But talk to us a little about, I've seen a few MSPs get involved in InfraGard. Is there value there? What do you get out of it? As an MSP?
Sure. So, just started before how I got to InfraGard. There was a point where, this is going back very early on, where we had a client that a company that came to us that had a ransomware attack, and they were mandated to pay insurance to notify law enforcement. So they contacted the FBI. FBI came down there, took a bunch of images, dealt with us a little bit, and left. Having that initial interaction with the FBI, with their cyber squad, I realized that there's really great to have on both ends a relationship with sharing threat intelligence and sharing information on, hey, what's going on. So I initiated a conversation with their cyber squad, and got in contact with someone who is really, with FBI special agents, a lot of them, like some of them are more technical than others. The one that I got in touch with was very super technical. I started sharing information back and forth with him. Hey, here's what we're seeing. Anytime there was a security incident, I would send a anonymized report of, hey, here's all the stuff that happened. Here's what we saw. And I just started, got into the habit of doing that, really establishing that relationship. At some point, they said, hey, we have this cool program called InfraGard. Purpose of InfraGard is most of the country's critical infrastructure is ran by the private sector. Think about MSPs. We're supporting critical infrastructure, local municipalities, waste management. A lot of the things that make the country run is ran by the private sector. InfraGard was created to make a more resilient critical infrastructure that's in the hands of the private sector by really encouraging information sharing within the private sector, but also having a relationship with FBI and other federal law enforcement agencies that, hey, let's have a two-way stream of information sharing, both in our community, but also sharing with you. And then on your end, when you see stuff, share it with us. So it was born out of Cleveland, I think, about I think in the late '90s, early 2000s. And right now there's an InfraGard National Members Alliance, which is a national organization, but most big cities or there's at least one in every state has a chapter. So it's people become members of their chapter. The chapter is a member of InfraGard National Members Alliance. The memberships are ran by the FBI. So in order to get in, you have to be a US citizen. They do a background check on you. They validate you. And once you're a member, they do give periodic. They do some sharing of information. It's not the timeliest always because it has to be put together by the FBI. It's not law enforcement sensitive. There's no like security clearance. It's a lot of it's like general broadcast. Sometimes you'll see things that aren't necessarily you'll see out there, but sort of it's known. But the real good information sharing is within the chapters. So I've been president of InfraGard Cincinnati for the past couple of years, and it's my 4-minute spiel on InfraGard.
That's cool. So Chaim, it's not to the degree of like you have a tip and threat intel sharing real time type of thing, but because you guys are talking back and forth, there could be certain reasons like, hey, I'm seeing this, are you seeing this?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Both, like I said, both within the industry, the state, people in the private sector, but also to the FBI, and, have those relationships, established before stuff happened.
Yeah. You made a comment that, again, I scratch my head, Chip. I probably shared this with you a bunch of times. It's like, back in 2017 or 2018, I took a group of MSPs to the NCCOE in Maryland. That's the National Cybersecurity. Gosh, I'm even drawing a blank on it, but it's the think tank, if you will, at NIST of we do as MSPs touch about 70, 60, somewhere between 60 and 70% of critical infrastructure. Our relationship, with the MSI, the CIS and the MSISAC, we know firsthand from, Phyllis Lee, who is a co-host of mine on the cyber call, that north of 60% of all SLTTs, state, local, tribal, territorial, you said municipalities, right, Chaim? We also touch. And so it's still amazing to me that we really don't get the attention I think we should from CISA and, federal. Does that strike you, first of all, Chip, odd, or is it, again, just because we're not big enterprise and that's why, even though the majority of the nation's economy is on our back?
It has always struck me as odd. Back when we had just transitioned away from being an MSP and turned ourselves into a software provider. My old MSP company in the early aughts, or middle aughts, maybe around 2010. And we brought we had a very similar experience as Chaim, and I wound up as part of Philly's InfraGard group and, enjoyed the interaction with the FBI folks there. But I do think, Andrew, and I agree that there's a lack of recognition of just how much of the country's business infrastructure, at least, and by extension, some of its general infrastructure that MSPs are responsible to manage. I think the reason that there's not more focus on the MSP community, that, for those of us who work in this community, the channel, as we all call it, is super clear, easy to navigate. We understand how to communicate with each other, what conferences to go to, what products to use, that kind of thing. I think that's much more of a black box when you're talking about people who work in government, who are used to dealing with, what's the right word? Much higher power, but higher dollar value enterprises that they think have an individual much greater impact on the economy. And that's not a criticism. It kind of makes sense, right? If you're working, in a government or a quasi-government position, and you have to have the most impact with your time, do you choose to go to an MSP conference and talk to, maybe 500 or 800 individual MSPs that might be representing 10,000 different customers, or do you choose to hone in on IBM and General Motors and General Electric, where each of them have 100,000 employees? So it's a matter of scale, and I think that's the issue. They find it a lot easier to communicate there. CIS is an interesting case because they obviously get the channel, and they are trying very hard to bridge that gap that exists.
Yeah, very cool. So Chaim, before we go into this Microsoft article that you referenced, I figured I'd give screen sharing to you because, and this is what I was talking about, putting yourself out there. I wanted the other MSPs to see what you do and maybe how you use it, like to educate customers and prospects about how easy it is to hijack a machine through either a man-in-the-middle attack or some type of token harvesting. So I'll let you take it from here.
Cool. Can you see my screen okay and hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Awesome. So I have a couple slides just I'll run through pretty quickly here. Again, this is my name where I work. So just real quick, I know you guys are really familiar with session token. I just want to touch in a little bit on the background because some of the people aren't aware of some of the details of token theft and different kinds of infrastructure there are. Basic authentication without multi-factor, username, password. With multi-factor, there's that extra validation, but no matter how a person authenticates, the login session is the same once the authentication completes. There is two different types of, we used to call it man in the middle. Microsoft's coined it AITM for adversary in the middle. We'll go with them. I know they like to change things. This used to be the most common one where adversary in the middle phishing attack is where you have a user going to a website. There is an attacker server in the middle that's listening to all the communication that goes back and forth between you and the website, and it's relaying information in real time in an unaltered state. Highlight that, unaltered state. Back and forth, and what you're seeing is what the attacker is connecting to the real website and sending back to you. So what you see on the screen is legitimate traffic from the website, but you're going through the attacker's server. To contrast that with an indirect adversary in the middle phishing toolkit is where the attacker controls the communication that goes between you and Microsoft and has their own front end that you're seeing that is not necessarily what Microsoft is getting or whatever website's getting back to you. Now, what my presentation is going to show you Microsoft, but this can be done to virtually every single website that exists with just how authentication works. So again, with indirect one, it's the same structure as a direct one, but the attacker has more control of the content that goes back and forth between you and the host website. Just real quick, this was the first I looked into. There's a pretty famous open source toolkit called EvilJinx. I looked into it in 2000, maybe late 2019, 2020. It's been around for a very long time. And I've always been surprised how long it took for attackers to start utilizing it. 2020, we had at our company a really big push for multi-factor authentication. We got 99% of our clients. We had over a half a year without a single security incident with regards to email security. But we knew that something was coming. 2021 was the first time I detected a real live instance of adversary in the middle being used in the wild. I had my eyes open for it. I have this weird fascination with phishing and investigating phishing, back-end architecture and, pulling stuff apart. So I was always, looking when I'm doing those phishing analysis of, what kind of toolkits are they using? I've stolen enough toolkits to get a basic understanding and recognize the differences. This is September 2021, again, 2 years ago when I first saw initial instance of a phishing attempt with token theft being used. Now, thankfully, in that case, it was not successful. It was a very targeted and sophisticated attack where it was sent to a law office where the hosting infrastructure they used to host the the phishing server was in the same city, it was in Cincinnati. So they went to the trouble of getting infrastructure that checked in from Cincinnati, so that when we saw it in our logs, the location was Cincinnati. Now, it was a wrong ISP and triggered an alert, but it was just really interesting to see that, how much the lengths that they went to. And it was specific user, like the CEO of the company, and it looked like a really targeted attempt. Now, thankfully, it was a reported phishing email, so we caught it and stopped it. 2022 was our first time of it actually seeing abuse, where it led to a successful business email compromise. So the user had multi-factor authentication, and they were still able to compromise it using the token theft capabilities. And this was just the email from what I showed you before. And here's a little bit of just the attackers adapting to what people were doing with mitigations, and you've seen how attackers were continuing to evolve their tactics, where there was a massive QR code campaign that started in late 2023 that it is still going today. It comes and goes in waves. The big problem with QR codes is that it forces the user to take out their typically personal device and do whatever they need to do on their personal device instead of their corporate-owned computer, typically. So it adds a bit more, I'm going to use the word legitimacy to using the QR code. In this one you see here, it's getting the user is, hasn't in the past typically set up MFA. So this is just, playing on that, that previous things that people do to get them to set up MFA, scan the QR code, then it takes them to a phishing website. That's what that phishing website looked like before. So I get to the fun stuff. So time for the presentation here. So just to show you infrastructure here. So this is a VM that I have on my end here, and I'm going to be connecting to a phishing toolkit. In this case, I mentioned EvilJinx. Right now, it's just being hosted on an Azure VM. You can put it anywhere, either on premise or in the cloud. A lot of times, I've been seeing attackers use the front end, like on Cloudflare. They put Cloudflare in front of it, so our IP is continuously changing. But essentially, the barrier to entry to do this is really, really low. All you need is a domain, downloading the repository from GitHub, installing it, and that's pretty much it. I mean, there's a little bit of configuration you need to do, but once you do that, it's pretty much up and running. So right now, this server here in black is, like I said, it's hosted in Azure. So, and I have a lure, which is what you create for targeted phishing attacks, and these are they're unique, but you can automate, just the creation of that. And if you don't have the right one, it'll automatically block you. But essentially, this link here, you see, you're looking at this domain, a little bit of play on words here. This link here, when I go to it, it is going to take you to a Microsoft 365 sign-in page that will go through this server here, and then it'll in real time present information back to the browser. So I'll go ahead and get that going and show you how it looks on the back end. So I'm going to go to it here. It may take a couple seconds to load. You see here, got a new visitor. I don't have a ton of.
Are you just while that's loading, are you seeing more, this is the different phishing attacks, and it's interesting you brought up QR codes because we've talked about that a lot, right, Chip, in the last few weeks. But are you seeing the threat actors spinning up and trying to get geolocation out of the equation more and more, so that that's not a something that's going to be in detection?
Not typically. Now, it is very possible when throughout the years of looking at alerts, it is very easy for them to be much more sophisticated. And personally, I don't know why they aren't. A very common tactic that isn't used often is using residential proxies, where they'll buy access to compromised IoT devices, compromised devices, and will like dynamically route their traffic, and they can very easily choose locations. So like they can say, hey, give me a residential IP in whatever city I'm targeting. And on the logging perspective, it'll make it very difficult. I do see it in the logs, but it's not as common as I would expect.
Yeah, it's interesting. We talk a lot, Chip, we talk a lot about the laziness of it still too, that one of your go-tos in picking up campaign. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we see a lot of this, Andrew, as you know, we've talked about a lot this quite a few times on this call, and we see the laziness in the initial breach, but we also see in a high percentage of the cases that once that initial breach occurs, and the living off the land session, segment starts in the attack, they are localizing IPs, at least down to the state that the business is operating in. So, as we view this, the anatomy of this attack is what Chaim is showing on screen now, is executed by one person who then hands off the token and the account to somebody else. And that person is smarter, and they are typically localizing one way or another.
And Chaim, back to you, but it's amazing the ecosystem of access broker to the next party in line, is Chip's talking about, isn't it?
Yeah, it definitely is. There's actually someone in the local FBI field office who is running a case on not an access broker, but a group that runs the infrastructure for like proxying services. So they compromise devices and then sell that access to other threat actors group to then utilize in attacks like this.
Yep.
Or typically more other kind of attacks, but
yeah, it's the spin on what we used to call botnets. And those same botnets that existed in the early 2000s on and up to today are now used for selling localization services.
Yep. And it's ridiculously cheap if you look at their pricing. I mean, it's like dollars. So
Yeah.
Well, it's a bunch of a Satoshi.
right.
All right, Chaim. Back.
I'll go ahead. So I have an account here. I have a real Microsoft 365 tenant that I have, and I'm going to authenticate to it. So this account does have multi-factor authentication through Entra set up, and just to show you here. And now, like you see here in real time, I'm getting a push notification from, you can see it from Microsoft asking me to confirm this. Even though this account has multi-factor authentication, I'm gonna go ahead and approve it on my end here. And then you see here, it takes me to, hey, you're already logged in. Now, again, I know you guys are pretty familiar with it. It's what you see on the screen is directly from Microsoft. What's up here isn't. So here's where, user awareness training of being able to recognize this really comes into play. So there is, like it looks like user, signed in completely. So it does look, pretty legitimate, from the user side. Now getting back to the attacker server here, this EvilGene server here, you see here, I have a, looking here in green, it captured the user account, the credentials, and then it detected the token interception. So let me go ahead and take a look at that session. And you see here, the coloring is a little bit weird, but the username, the password, and right here is the session token. So with this alone, I can authenticate to that user account with any form of multi-factor authentication or credential theft. And I can demonstrate this for you here by opening up Chrome, and just to show you here, I'm not logged in on this browser account. I'm not logged into anything. I'm going to take that cookie that I just took from there, and first I'm going to clear the ones that are in the session. I'm going to import it. Again, I just copied and pasted it. I have it in my session. I'm going to go to that website again. No password, no username, no multi-factor authentication. I just loaded that token into my.
That's awesome, Chaim. Did you freeze or did I freeze?
No, Chaim froze.
Okay.
Hope he didn't just hack himself. He took his own SonicWall down.
Oh my gosh, too funny. Let's see if he comes back.
Low blow, Chip. Low blow. Come
No, I meant that as a compliment, Cory. You know, he's
on, man. It's okay.
got to stay on top of it.
Mic drop.
But Chip, is this fairly similar to what you were mentioning you and Ben do?
Yeah, virtually identical. I mean, Ben uses the same tool when he's demoed this, and we've talked about this a couple of times. And maybe while we're waiting for Chaim to come back, Ben, you you were doing some experimenting with the Microsoft Secure Token component that's in preview that's supposed to prevent this. What have you learned about that?
Yeah, and I would love Cory's also to weigh in too, see if he's experimented with it. But there is a one that's in, I think it's in preview. If you're, was it E5, you can enable, secure sessions, and
it's funny you mentioned that. There's an article. I'm gonna yeah. So can I bring up the article?
Yeah.
And just show everybody. Let me stop sharing this. And if Chaim comes back, Amy, will you let us know?
He's rejoining right now.
Okay. I just want to show that everybody. I'll put this URL in for you. This is what I was going to talk about with Chaim in a moment. We'll let him finish up. Hey, Chaim, we got you.
Sorry, everything crashed on me. Zoom crashed.
That's okay. That's okay. Real quick, just a quick timeout. So this is an article, by the way, again, kudos to you, Chaim, that you found. So Ben, you are talking about, they go through this. Have you seen this article, by the way, Chip and everyone? Microsoft does a phenomenal job detailing how token theft works. And then they go into, Ben, specifically, this part of Entra on token binding. I think that's what you're talking about. Is that correct, Ben, by chance?
Yep.
Yeah. And with this, are you familiar, Chaim, what license you need for the token binding, and are you getting adoption of this, by the way?
So that's really getting into mitigations, and I believe you need the Azure AD P2 license to be able to fully utilize this. And it doesn't fully bind it on all Microsoft 365 services. This is not the route that we do that we go down in terms of mitigation.
It's not okay.
We go down another route,
and we're going to talk about that. So go ahead, Ben. Sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say, have you seen this be effective? I actually enabled it, followed the instructions and everything, and was still able to capture tokens. The only time I've seen it where you haven't been able to capture those tokens is with the FIDO2 keys, or Microsoft's the most recent, the pass keys with the Authenticator app.
right?
The other area, Chaim, I'll let you pull up your screen when you're ready. The other area the other tools, and again, hey, I just go ahead and go buy this for all your clients. But there are solutions out there like really powerful, powerful ZTNA solutions like AppGate with strong access control, where it's device bound, IP bound, it's bound to MAC address, it's bound to there's all these different things, Ben, that and those I've seen be rock solid. Like,
yeah, and Andrea in chat mentioned also SIP is doing, they've kind of adopted an open source project that essentially puts a small CSS kind of script inside of the template. And so when you go to that, the CSS goes and looks and says, well, that's not a Microsoft domain. It's not where we're expecting it. So if it's a big red thing, do not sign in. My question would be I don't think it would be too difficult for Evil Genex to detect that CSS and just pretty much, couldn't it just like parse it out of there?
Yeah, I can talk to this because I've been.
Yeah, go, Chaim.
Sure. So if I can just back up just a second, once I'm out, I'll talk about this. So January 9th, somebody from Zolder put out an article and really created a service on, hey, this guy figured out a way to have a honeypot if someone uses the adversary in the middle against you. So what they did was they, like you just mentioned, Microsoft allows you to use on your background image on your Microsoft 365 account. So behind this screen, you can point to an external image to be your background image. Now, what this person realizes, hey, I can actually host that image, but if I'm hosting the image, then I can see the refer who's requesting it. So when a user goes into the logon to their Microsoft 365 account, then they're going to ask me for the image, but they're also going to tell me, hey, where did I come from? The expected response is log on to microsoftonline.com, because that's where the refer should come from. If they don't come from log on to microsoftonline.com, that means there's a problem. So getting back on the first article, Wesley Neal, he's like, hey, I'll just put like a tracking pixel and an alert gets tripped every time I get a request for that dead pixel, essentially, that's not from Microsoft. That's when the community, the cyber community was like, hey, wait a second, what else can we do with this? And it was a combination of somebody from Huntress as well as Kevin from SIP you mentioned. So like, hey, instead of just having a dead pixel, why don't we give you an actual background image where instead of it looking like this, it looks like this, so that you never actually put your credentials in, and we can get alerted to it. So this is where I built something very similar to this. That's where I started my presentation talking about two different kinds of phishing toolkits: direct proxy and indirect proxy. With direct proxy, this works just fine because the threat actor passes all the traffic back and forth. Now, I'm also a member of the person that created Legal.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Ukraine somewhere.
Oh, we got you. We got you. Okay. You there, Chaim?
All right. Who's Dawson Chaim?
Cory, are you attacking him by any chance? This is pretty interesting though, but
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, and maybe he was going to get to that. I would be surprised if these other token theft softwares is not just pretty much just leaving that part out, since they do pull all of that information and like background images from Microsoft. They're going to give you that feeling of, oh, this is perfectly legit. So
yeah, you had no luck with that token binding then?
no, it was able to get around it every time, and I thought that I even checked the instructions a couple of times, and it still was pretty ineffective. But
Interesting.
FIDO keys were, and pass keys through Authenticator. But the funny thing is with pass keys through the Authenticator app is Microsoft asks you pretty much to take your phone and scan a QR code when you go to sign in.
No way.
And it's like, and so we're all the time going, don't scan random QR codes or anything. And Microsoft says, except for this one time, it's perfectly fine. It's coming from me. I promise it's legit. And so not only that is you have to have really kind of a very up-to-date version of whatever phone you're using. I think it's Android 14, but some Android providers don't support it quite yet. So like I have a OnePlus that doesn't support passkeys. Other Android hardware manufacturers may, but mine doesn't. I had to use the wife's iPhone in order to test it.
Interesting. Enrique, you got something for us?
Yes, quick question. So like in this scenario that they were sharing with us, when they get the token stolen and the cookie on the Microsoft logs, or the login logs, do you see it as a new connection with the correct IP address, or based that it's using a token or cookie that was stolen, this is show other data?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Enrique. And we see this 500 times a week now. We actually track this number. And what you see is you'll see an unattended login, non-interactive sign-in. So it usually shows up as a WCSS shell login. It almost always comes from a different IP address. And then quite rapidly, there's a subsequent login, also non-interactive, that's going to come from a localized address. That's what I was alluding to before. And, you know, we built many of our partners have either used the templates that we've constructed in Respond or have built their own templates that look at the various actions that an attacker takes when they do this. You know, and by the way, you know, so this is not mitigation. This is, hey, I spotted that this has occurred. The token got used, and attackers now inside the, you know, the perimeter, but we can shut that attacker down in minutes and prevent, you know, an escalation and theft of data and everything else that can occur. The solution that Chaim was presenting before he got blown up, I think is a really good one. The trouble is that there's a lot of organizations who aren't willing to customize their login screen, you know, so it becomes a project for an MSP to deal with. And he's back. So Chaim, why don't you take over again? He's kind of back.
Sure, sorry about that. Can you hear me okay?
Gotcha, bud.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. Sorry about that. My Zoom just crashed again.
No
So
worries.
what I was saying, a problem that we have with that background, that fish warmer, is that it only works on direct proxy attacks, where the attacker is kind enough to send the request that Microsoft gives the user, hey, go to this location to get the background image. Now, when that background image is all configured with SIP and the way I have it, on a normal logons, the user doesn't see anything. The user never knows that this thing is running in the background. It's only when the tool gets tripped does it kick in and change their background to something, hey, stop what you're doing, don't go any further. The problem is indirect proxy attacks. So with indirect proxy attacks, the attacker never requests that information from Microsoft. So Microsoft will let the attacker know that, hey, here's this organization has some custom CSS, use this image for the background. The attacker says, no, thank you, and doesn't pass anything along. So the user never requests it on their end, and neither does the attacker. So that whole tool is out the window. And the problem is that most phishing campaigns have been moving to indirect proxy attacks more and more. Initially, I used to see direct ones, but as time goes on, I'm seeing less and less direct proxy attacks.
Is it to get around the, hey, trust, you know, do you want to trust this out? All those notices, is that part of the reason, Chaim, again, to get away from any type of detection that, you know, shouldn't say any type,
Right.
again, to
Right.
bring down as much detection as possible?
I think so, and I think it's the ones that we're seeing now are from very large phishing as a platform services, and they're just building their own front end and not actually like relaying information real time to Microsoft. They're just doing what they want the way they want to do, and they're selling that phishing as a platform. And Microsoft and the FBI has identified different threat actor groups that are running these services, and they've incorporated token theft, and most of them are not using direct proxy attacks. So it makes it a lot more difficult to detect for this particular tool. Now, something to consider, and I've floated this idea to, again, we have to get approvals when we make any modifications to management, is what happens when what if we give a user not a green light, but an orange light? So we always modify their background and it says, hey, it's just like a modified background and says, please verify you're on logon to microsoftalign.com. Now, every time they log in, they should see that. If they don't see it, it should be a red flag. And if they see a red flag, it should be a red flag. So, and if they just see the yellow, it means, hey, please validate. So that's just an idea that I had floating around. But again, it is impactful to an organization and will require buy-in to an organization. And it also relies on the user to be able to recognize a lack of, orange light, to do that. What we're doing in terms of mitigations, someone I mentioned to a bit earlier, what will stop us attack for completing is phish-resistant multi-factor authentication using things like Microsoft has 3 different styles of phish-resistant. There is security keys, aka passkeys, which is in preview, coming soon. It's a little bit difficult now because at least on the iPhone, you have to use them as your password manager. It's just not, it just doesn't fully work yet. and it's bound to Microsoft Authenticator. You can't use the passkey and other authenticator or other, solutions that can support passkeys. Physical hardware tokens, but they aren't fully supported yet on Android devices, on like native mail applications, and requires you to authenticate and carry it around. Then there's certificate-based authentication, which will also stop these kind of attacks. The problem with certificate-based authentication is, number one, you need a certificate authority. Number two, you need a deployment mechanism. So how are you deploying that certificate to your user's iPhone? It's difficult. You have MDM. So what we've been doing, and it's really the best of the worst options, is utilizing Microsoft Intune to enroll devices, getting it to a compliant state, then putting conditional access policy, only allowing enrolled devices. Now, if the user's domain joined, you can get to that same state by doing hybrid joined, by enrolling all the workstations and making it hybrid joined, and then putting that same conditional access policy and only allowing that. But then you have to deal with mobile devices either way. And that requires buy-in because most people use personal devices. So it does require a buy-in, but our same push for having 99% of users in 2020 on MFA, we're having that same push currently on Intune as, hey, this is going to stop this from happening. So we have had multiple attacks that were stopped by the Intune device requirement compliance. That really, we see that this is something that stops, because the way it works on the back end is that when the attacker server hits Microsoft, they can have the correct credentials, but Microsoft's never going to issue the token in the first place, because remember, Microsoft just sees the attacker, and when they see the attacker server, it's not enrolled in anything. With FIDO won't replay, so they can't replay that. They cannot replay anything from the security key to Microsoft. So, and also certificate-based authentication is the same thing. So these are the ways that it's really stopping it before it hits an alert.
Right.
Now, I have a bit more detections if I have a couple minutes on sort of what I've been doing. Have a minute or two, or
We're at two. We're at two. So if people need to drop,
cool. That's all right.
We'll bring you back because this was great, Chaim. I really appreciate it. I'll reach out to you on LinkedIn if that's cool. Sound
Cool.
good? Thank
Yeah,
you.
sorry about the connection issues, running into some issues on my end here.
No worries. No worries. It was awesome having you with us. Thanks, everyone.
Bye,
Talk soon.
guys.
Bye.
All right, thank you.